then look at further and consider further before we're in a position to bring the application back before members. And that's why the application isn't back on the agenda today.
Thank you. Just one more question, convener. In page 10, it's the redevelopment of the former manual brickwork site. At the last meeting, officers had stated quite clearly that they were nearly across the finishing line with this. It was in relation to the Section 75 issue, and I think it was to do with the health situation. And just wondering if Mr. Whittle could maybe give us any update on this. Thank you.
Yes, certainly big progress has been made in this, but Bernard, can you?
Yes, convener, Provost. Yeah, as you mentioned, there have been discussions and are discussions ongoing with NHS Forth Valley and the applicants in relation to developer contributions towards healthcare provision. We feel that those are moving forward positively, but there is still work to do on that. So there is still a discussion ongoing, and we are hopeful to keep the application moving forward to see a conclusion of the Section 75.
Thank you, Mr. Whittle. Thanks, convener. That's me.
I think we'll come to Blackwood, please.
Councillor Blackwood?
Yeah, just a quick question, convener, on the Gilson, the one who had the beneficial site visit. Will that come to the committee before the election? Feeling that would it mean another site visit after the election? The new councillors, the new planning committee.
Bernard?
Convener, yeah, Councillor Blackwood, thank you for your question there. It's obviously there is additional work that we need to do on the application, so it may well be, I think the chances probably are that we're not going to be in a position to bring this back before members before the elections take place. In that instance, the application would then go to a future meeting of the planning committee after the elections, and I would say it would be at the discretion of that committee at that time whether they felt it was appropriate to have a further site inspection or to rely on the officer report presented at that time. There'd be no formal requirement for members to have a further site visit if they wanted to take that decision to proceed on the basis of the report and recommendation to consider the application.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
We've got Councillor McCluckie, please.
Councillor McCluckie?
Thanks for allowing me in on a similar theme to what's been raised at these two these applications. Can you tell us what's the latest on the one at Earth? Obviously we had a public hearing there, and obviously all the members went out there, and then we went to sites. And once again, if it's not concluded by next month, it's basically starting from scratch again. Obviously developers pay a lot of money to put applications in. And why is this one no ready for a special meeting to conclude that?
Bernard?
Thank you, convener, Councillor McCluckie. I mean, obviously the Earth Mains Farm application isn't on the agenda today or in the minutes, but just by way of an update, you know, again, there was a very useful site visit on that application, and a number of questions and issues were raised by members and third parties who'd made representations on the application. So there was a fair amount of work still to do on those applications to gather additional information for us to then be in a position to bring a report back for members' determination. If we're not in a position to do that before the elections, then given that is that application is a major application which is significantly contrary to the local development plan, in that instance there would be a requirement for a further predetermination hearing to be undertaken. Now that's not to say that the application is starting from scratch. Obviously there's been a lot of work done on assessment of the application to date. That work is not wasted and would be continued after the elections.
Hey, thanks, convener.
In fairness, we have this problem every 5 years. How about hopefully we can get it brought to the committee as quickly as possible after the elections and dealt with, aren't we? Councillor Brady. Anyone else? More questions on the minutes?
Good.
Yeah, item 4. Brent, you take item 4.
Thank you, convener. The report before you today is an update report in relation to an application for the erection of an outbuilding and hard standing. The building would be used for the stabling of horses, the storage of associated foodstuffs, and equine-related equipment, and for the storage of equipment for maintaining the holding. Members will recall that the Planning Committee considered this application on the 21st of April 2021, when it was agreed to continue consideration of the application to allow further information to be provided by officers in relation to badges, to allow the applicant an opportunity to consider the objections received and allow the committee to carry out a site visit. The committee site visit was arranged for the 4th of May 2021, but unfortunately a quorum of committee members was not met on that day, and a further site visit was arranged and took place on the 31st of May 2021. Members will also recall that the committee agreed to further continue the application on the 16th of June 2021 and again on 20th of January 2022, with no further consideration of the application pending an investigation into a complaint received regarding the handling of the planning application, including the objectivity and judgment of the case officer in his assessment of the application. The acting head of planning has concluded his investigation under the council's complaints procedures and has not upheld the complaint. Members will recall that one of the key considerations in respect of this application is impacts on badges. This report covers this matter in paragraphs 5 to 8 of the report. Paragraph 5 notes that a badger worker with Scottish badges, who is also a Falkirk Council Countryside Ranger, visited the site on the afternoon of the 20th of April 2021 and concluded that the field within which the application site lies is a prime foraging site for badgers. Paragraph 7 of the report notes that a badger survey report accompanies the application and concludes that badgers are not a constraint to the proposed development. In view of any perceived conflict of interest from the Countryside Ranger having visited the site in her capacity as a badger worker with Scottish badges, the council's other Countryside Ranger was requested to review the badger report. She concluded that the proposed development would not have any effect on badgers, as it affects only a small part of the field and would not restrict access to any foraging sites. She therefore concurred with the conclusion of the applicant's badger survey report. Now, however, due to ongoing concerns retained by an objector to the planning application in relation to the applicant's badger survey, the Development Management Unit more recently commissioned a badger survey to be undertaken by the Council's Ecology Term Consultant, WSP. The survey by WSP was carried out on the 27th of January 2022, just under 2 months ago. And the survey report concluded that the proposed development is not anticipated to cause direct disturbance to sets within the survey area. It is, however, evident that the application site is located within an active badger territory, and therefore general mitigation measures to limit disturbance to commuting and foraging badgers and maintain surrounding foraging resources are recommended. An additional recommendation is to incorporate native planting into the proposed development, which would be beneficial to badger due to loss of foraging habitat. Paragraphs 8 to 10 of the report relate to submissions in relation to the suitability of the proposed building for the keeping of horses. The planning position in relation to this matter is that this is not a material planning consideration and does not preclude the Planning Committee from approving the application. If following any grant of planning permission, there was a requirement to change any such matter, such as the design, the internal layout, or external finishes of the building to comply with industry or any other relevant legislation and standards in relation to such matters as animal welfare, the applicant would need to seek the opinion of the planning authority as to whether such changes could be considered a non-material variation to the planning permission or whether a new planning application would be required. Paragraph 11 of the report notes that further representations were received since the application was originally considered by the committee on the 21st of April 2021. In the main, these further representations reiterated and expanded on the concerns raised in the original representations, which were summarised and responded to in the 21st of April 2021 report to committee. However, the further representations did include a number of additional points, and they are outlined in paragraph 12 of your report before you today, and are responded to in detail in paragraph 13 of your report. I would further note, just before concluding, that a late representation from one of the objectives was emailed to members at 10:20 last night, and was copied to officers this morning at 9:33. So we've only had a very short window to review that late representation, but from a perusal this morning, we would initially conclude that it doesn't raise any additional members which have not been covered in the report. The report's before you. In conclusion, convener, it is not considered that any new matters have been raised that would alter the previous recommendation to grant planning permission. The recommendation contained in the report dated 21st of April 2021 is therefore reiterated with alterations to reflect the advice of the Badger survey carried out by WSP, and in addition an informative has been added, and this reflects the advice of the flood prevention team, and that advice is also outlined in the report before you this morning. Thank you, convener.
Thanks, Brent. I now heard from his department. There's 3 deputations requested from one from the Nation Council, one from 2 individuals. Members have to determine whether or not they wish to hear those deputations.
Convener, I move that we didn't hear the deputations. There's nothing new. We've been to site. We've had more independent experts and badgers out there. We have a very thorough report for badger experts. And as I say, no more can be done that I see. There's nothing new. We've heard the officers saying here, and we've already heard the deputations previously. So if there's nothing new to add, I just don't see why we're listening to only mayor. All the investigations, all the studies and everything, the full information's in that report. The objectors are obviously still unhappy, but at the end of the day, we've had experts do everything they can to get the information, and we go along with that. So I didn't think we should hear the deputation, and I'd be happy to move granting this application with the conditions.
Anyone going through any questions?
So I think the first matter to determine is about the deputations.
Deal with the deputations issues first, and afterwards the future application. The determination of that application.
Councillor Boyce.
Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, convener. Brent, this is sort of question to yourself first of all. There seems to have been some additional items added in since we did the original look at this application. In that case, if I'm correct, are these additional items from the current objectors or they're from different objectors. What I'm trying to establish is we did, if I remember rightly, we did hear from the objectors and we did hear from the applicant in the first meeting. But if there has been additional information, and if there is additional information which the applicant's agent or the objectors wish to put to committee, then potentially I think we should hear that.
Brent?
Thank you, Councillor Bass. Just to clarify, firstly, that from memory, I think there were just the two objectors to the application, and it's there's been no further representations from any other party, so it's solely further points raised by the existing objectors. I'm just looking at paragraph 11 of the report. There were further representations received in advance of the 16th of June 2021 report, and they're outlined in section 12 of your report. The committee on the 16th of June 2021 didn't consider the application. It was continued at that point because of an investigation into a complaint received. So while those points are recorded, those further points are recorded in the report, the committee haven't to date directly considered those, but they are, as I say, they are summarised and responded to in the report before you today.
Councillor Bowes, yeah, content with that?
I think, and I'm just trying to get this right because it's slightly confusing on it with this one. We've not had one that's gone this way. I'm just trying to confirm because I'm certain there was a presentation by objectors and there was a presentation by the applicant's agent and previously. Am I right in saying then that there's more information that's came since those presentations were done, and we've not heard from either side since the additional information came? Sorry, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. If we've already heard from the applicant's agent and the objectors on every detail of this report, I'm fine to agree with John. If we haven't, then I would like to hear from the applicants.
There was
the objectors.
The deputations by the objectors and the agent were at the original meeting on the 21st of April 2021. I mean, it's difficult. It's been over such a long period of time. It's difficult to remember exactly what was raised at that meeting on the 21st of April and whether it. But certainly there were. It may be the case that some of the matters raised by the objectors when they spoke on the 21st of April 2021 are summarised in paragraph 11, but I can't confirm that with any great confidence. Okay. All I can say is there were further submissions that came in after April 21 meeting, and they're summarised in the report in paragraph 12.
Okay, thanks, Brent. I think again with the time that's been here. And obviously given the applicant's agent time as well, and to be honest, I don't remember what the full details of the both said. I would probably prefer to hear them today because it has been nearly a year since we actually heard from them.
Okay, we have I assume a mover for rejection and a mover for hearing. Is that a fair interpretation? In which case, can we have a
Councillor McHugh would like to come in, please.
Councillor McHugh?
Thanks, convener. Just going along with what Councillor Bowes is saying, and also the fact that we've had numerous changes within the committee. I'm just thinking about what the Provost was highlighting and Councillor Blackwood in the minute. about changes in committees, that I think it would be beneficial for us to hear this deputation this morning.
Anyone?
Convener, I'll withdraw my point in and let's hear it. I thought we would just try to be quicker, but obviously if some members want to hear it, I'm happy to go along.
Thanks very much, Councillor. The first, first is first in line.
Hello, hello.
Kevin.
It's actually Susan. It's Susan Bond. I'll be doing the first 5 minutes.
All right. Okay. Hey, Susan. The floor's
Right,
yours.
well, thank you, councillors, for allowing me to speak at this late stage. I'll keep it brief because obviously what you were saying was right. There's been so much information given in the past, and there's been over the old information. Obviously Fiona Wishart's report and her findings contradicted the first earlier report by Baker Ecology, and therefore the council planners decided that they'd probably be better getting another report. Now, I know this is old news, but the additional points I'd like to make in the application are: the applicant's agent has advised that the applicant owns all of the land covered by the application and that the correct land ownership certificate was completed when the application was submitted. We have repeatedly told the council since 2020 that the applicants do not own all of the area to be developed. And the council were actually told this recently by an expert planning lawyer on our behalf. The application should be deemed invalid because of an incorrect land ownership certificate. The application, as I say, for the land ownership certificate is inaccurate. That has been confirmed by our lawyer. The applicants were informed yesterday by lawyers that they did not own all of the area to be developed. And again, I can't emphasize enough, the land ownership certificate is incorrect, and they have used this certificate as part of their application process. The other quick thing I would like to add was, yes, the council did get a new survey done. It does not agree with the Baker survey, the first survey. It did confirm that badgers use the site for foraging and there would be a loss of foraging caused by the development. But you have to remember, councillors, this same Baker survey, the first one, was still going to be used up until recently to pass this application had we not intervened and asked for it to be looked at by the councillors. So the other things that we have mentioned that have been mainly ignored are professional opinion from Dr. Guy Wimble, who has a master's degree in landscape architecture and over 25 years experience in landscape planning, including visual impact assessments. He is an expert witness at planning appeals, including public inquiries. As you know, we submitted reports from Dr. Deborah Marsden, who is an equine expert, stating that the building was not suitable for the stabling of horses, especially on a domestic level. And as you know, councillors, we submitted a report from Dr. Marsden highlighting why the building wasn't suitable, including lack of ventilation, roller doors, the unsuitability of the steel structure, and so on. So to actually say at this stage that on point 8 of the objections that due to ongoing concerns retained by an objector, that being us of course, to the planning application in relation to the applicant's badger survey, I feel the council did that themselves because it didn't obviously meet with the same the things that were said in the original survey. So it was said really for the council's benefit not for our benefit, because anything we have ever said, whether it's been submitted by professional opinion, has simply not been listened to. But all I want to really emphasise on is the land ownership certificate, which is inaccurate.
Thanks very much. That's a second objector. Is requested by this morning.
Good morning, convener and members. I'm Karen Gatherham and I'm representing Mr and Mrs Foster today. My clients as neighbours to the development would like to object to this application. My clients appreciate that some of their concerns are not considered material considerations to the granting of the planning permission. However, there are some points that I wish to expand on beyond what is in the report, and these are on the grounds of the scale and design of the development, the impact that the development will have on the badgers in the area, and the question of land ownership. Your own LDP2 states that any development should be of a scale, siting and design that means there will be no significant adverse impact on the rural environment. Furthermore, new development in the countryside should be of a scale and density to fit within the surroundings. The proposed building will be larger than Garble Cottage, which is situated next to it and will therefore overshadow the traditional design of the cottage. The material proposed for the construction of the building will reduce the sense of the underdeveloped character and remoteness of the area. The metal building does not reflect the more informal shapes of the present buildings and would create a visual conflict which undermines the location's sense of place and setting. The materials proposed are modern and the opposite of traditional and natural, and the materials proposed are not in keeping with the Council's own policy and guidance for development within this area. While this style of construction may be acceptable in an agricultural or a light industrial setting, they are ill suited to this rural residential area. The application contradicts the Council's vision and therefore is contrary to the policy P14 in the LDP. The committee report Appendix 2 states that the proposed scale, form and materials of the proposed building are in keeping with a typical modern farm building. This statement is incorrect for many reasons. This is not a farm building. This permanent structure will visually overwhelm the present open ground between the three properties in the area, all of which are residential. It will destroy the sense of openness and the sense of nature of the area, and it will occupy a central position in relation to the existing three houses. It will not nestle into the existing settlement as it will become the most dominant building in the area, and this will negatively impact on the locality for decades to come, as it will change the character of the place completely from a charming settlement and a beautiful surrounding to an industrial feel. Therefore, members should refuse this application as it's contrary to the Council's policy and vision for the development in such an area. The impact on the badgers from the development of the area. Policy P19 promotes the protection and the enhancement of the habitats and species of importance. Accordingly, it states that development that is likely to have an adverse effect on protected species, such as badgers, will only be permitted where the applicant can demonstrate that a species licence is likely to be granted. To date, the applicant has not demonstrated that a licence is likely to be granted. Furthermore, that if development was to be approved, the Council will require appropriate mitigating measures to conserve and secure future management of the relevant heritage interest, in this case the badgers. The applicant has not demonstrated or provided members with any mitigation proposals to reduce any negative impacts. As this is contrary to the Council's own policy and supplementary guidance, this application should be refused until these points are addressed. There have now been 3 badger surveys carried out in the area. There is a long-established badger set less than 100 metres from the proposed development site, and the site in question is used by the badgers to forage. The development will impact on these animals in a number of different ways, including loss of foraging, the effects of light, the reduction of natural environment, increased traffic and loss of territory. According to Scottish Badgers, the second greatest threat to badgers is the loss of feeding resources, the first being increased traffic. According to my client's survey, there are badger sets adjacent to the site and badgers under sets are protected. No works other than above ground vegetation clearance with hand tools are permitted to come within 30 metres of the sets without a Nature Scott badger licence being in place. The council's own badger survey states that no badger sets were recorded in the site or within 30 metres of the site boundary. However, abundant evidence of badger activity was recorded in the survey area, including commuting and foraging activity within the site boundary. 3 active sets were recorded in the wider survey area, with the closest set being located 42 metres east of the proposed development. As it is evident that the development site is located within active badger territory, general mitigation measures to limit disturbance to commuting and foraging badgers and maintain surrounding foraging resources need to be in place prior to this application being granted, and therefore, as they are not, the application should be refused. The council has stated that condition 6 will be attached to the planning consent. It states that a further badger survey shall be carried out and submitted for the written approval of this planning authority no later than 2 months prior to the development commencing. What purpose will that serve? There have been 3 surveys carried out prior to this meeting. All surveys state there is significant badger activity in the area. If the new survey states that there is a set on the development site, will planning permission be revoked? We know that's very difficult. This seems a strange condition that plays lip service to the presence of the badgers but has no teeth. The condition will do nothing to prevent any adverse impact on protected species, and therefore on the grounds of this application should be refused. We have also reviewed the plans annexed to the planning application and the certification that the applicant own all of the land to which the application pertains. This is incorrect, as the applicant does not own the land between the edge of the access road itself and the field of their application site.
Could you join up, please?
Sorry?
Could you join up, please?
Okay.
Of the time.
Okay.
You.
Basically, in summary, the scale and design is contrary to council policy, will have an adverse impact on the surrounding landscape and beautiful residential amenity of the area. The applicant's not indeed identified any mitigations, and their land certificate is incorrect, as they do not own the area part of the access site, the application site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the members if there are any questions before we bring the planners back in? Okay.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Can I just ask Brent or Bernard,
It's questions to
is it relevant? Oh, this is regarding,
Councillor.
I understand that's,
At this stage, it's questions for the objectors.
okay.
If you have any questions of the either of the two.
Well, I'll ask the objector then, Convener. Is owning a piece of land relevant in planning terms?
It's not, but
That's fine, thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions for either? No. Yeah, I thank both the speakers for the objections to the application and for contribution this morning. It's given us something to think about.
Mr. Benny.
All right. Sorry, Mr. Benny.
Thank you.
Apologies for missing you out there. Almost passed over.
That's no problem at all. Thank you, Convener. My name is Andrew Benny. I'm a director of Andrew Benny Planning Limited, and I'm pleased to make this brief presentation in support of the application lodged by my client, Mr. Matthew Masterton. As is confirmed within the report by the Council's Director of Place Services, this application relates to direction of an outbuilding and associated formation of an area of hard standing on an area of land owned by my client. This report also sets in full the Council's consideration of this application to date,
and concludes once again by recommending, as was the case when the application was first brought before committee in April of last year, that planning permission be granted in respect of the development to which the application relates. I would wish to commend this report and its recommendation to committee, and in so doing, would wish to take this opportunity to highlight the following matters. The report by the Director of Police Services fully addresses all of the issues which have been put forward by those parties who have objected to the application, and concludes by stating unequivocally that none of these matters give rise to alter the recommendation that planning permission be granted in respect of the application. On a specific issue of the potential impact of the proposed development upon badgers in the wider area within which the application site is located, the report advises that, having considered this issue, the Council's Countryside Ranger has concluded that due to the small-scale nature of the proposed development, it will have no adverse impact upon any badger interest, and it will not restrict access to any foraging sites. The report also advises that this position has been confirmed within the terms of the report, which was prepared on behalf of the Council by WSP, the preparation of which, having been commissioned by the Council as a direct consequence and in response to the complaint which had been made by the third-party objector regarding the Council's handling of the application. As members have been advised, following a detailed and lengthy investigation, this complaint has not been upheld. When assessed against the relevant provisions of the local development plan, it is clear that the proposed development raises no issues of concern, and no material considerations have been identified which would outweigh the terms of the development plan support that exists in favour of the proposed development. Could I thank members for their time in listening to this presentation, and I would be pleased to address any answers which members may have. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mr. Binney. Does any members have any questions?
Convener, I have a question, if I may.
Hey, Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I wonder if Mr. Benny could maybe just comment on the issue that's been raised regarding the ownership of the land in question. There's obviously been issues raised in relation.
Thank you, Councillor. As far as my client's concerned, the statement made in the application is correct as far as we can ascertain.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Brent, or any other planners, my understanding of the situation is that the ownership of the ground is not an issue at the planning stage. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. This is outlined in the last couple of bullet points in paragraph 13 of the report. Sorry, if I can just find it. Where it says the applicant's agent has advised that the applicant owns the land covered by the application and the correct land ownership certificate was submitted. Yeah, we would accept that advice from the owner. It's not the planning authority's role to attempt to try and verify matters in relation to land ownership. We would further note that any dispute regarding land ownership is a civil matter and not material to a decision on the application. It may, however, be relevant to whether any grant of planning permission can be implemented, but in the first instance, it doesn't preclude the planning authority from going ahead and determining the application as it sees fit.
Mr. Anderson, could you clarify some of these points?
Thank you, Convener. And it was just to flag up that I think there are two aspects to the matter that the committee might want to be aware of. And I think, as Brent has just narrated, that is not generally a material consideration as to whether an applicant actually owns the land on which development is proposed to be carried out. It's the planning authority's function to decide whether or not the development's desirable in the public interest, and the answer to that shouldn't be affected by a consideration that a landowner is determined not to allow the development. I suspect another aspect to this that the objectors have brought up is that they consider there's an issue with the certificate and notification process that was undertaken when the application was submitted. And I suppose it's important to think through in that case, what are the requirements and why are they there? So I think the basic point is, although the applicant isn't required to own or control the site, there should be a certification as to ownership and a notification to an owner of land. And the reasons that notification are important are twofold primarily. That's to avoid the possibility of an owner selling land without knowing its true value given the grant of planning permission. And it's also so that a landowner can obtain information on the application from the planning authority or to make representations in relation to the application. So I'm reading now from one of our core textbooks in planning, and it just notes there that errors in the notification process, particularly those pointed out to the planning authority prior to its decision, but not remedied, may leave a grant of planning permission open to challenge in the courts by a person with a notifiable interest who received no notification of the application. So the issue there is, could potentially a grant of planning permission be challengeable in the courts due to a failure in a land certificate or a notification? Just on that point, I suppose it's also worth considering that the ill or the error there would be that the party isn't aware of the application and doesn't have the opportunity. And I think in this case, we have a situation where fairly substantial representations and comments have been able to be submitted by the neighbouring proprietors. But it's just to make the committee aware that there is the potential that there could be a future court challenge if it was considered that that really went to the root of the decision making. And obviously at the moment we've got some dubiety between the parties over the correct position. So thanks for bearing with me, convener, but I thought it was just important to draw out the full story there.
Okay, I understand there's a review underway within Parliament with the asset planning regulations. We can clarify that one. It seems to be contradictory to me anyway. But say like I said, there's any questions? Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, convener. It's for Mr. Henderson on what he says just now there, convener, because I think this is very important. If no matter what decision is made today, is it an offence to knowingly falsify a plan application?
Convener, with your leave, I can perhaps answer that point. Indeed, again, reading from my textbook here, hopefully to hand, I would say it is an offence to issue knowingly or recklessly a certificate which contains a statement which is false or misleading in a material particular, with liability and summary conviction to a fine not exceeding level 5 in the standard scale. Proceedings for such an offence may be brought within 2 years of commission of the offence rather than the normal 6-month period. So that obviously is a matter that's not within the domain of the local authority and the planning authority, which is why I restricted earlier comments to the position around any potential challenge to a decision that might be made by the committee. Thanks, convener.
Thanks, convener.
Anyone else?
Councillor Blackwood.
Councillor Blackwood?
Yeah, it's about this whole badger situation here. I'm looking at point 7, where the council's the other countryside ranger was requested to review the badger report and visited the site on 18th of May. She concluded that the proposed development would not have any effect on badgers, as it affects only a small part of the field and would not restrict access to any foraging sites. And then in point 8, the consultant's WSP, as it is evident the applicant's site is located within an active badger territory, general mitigation measures to limit disturbance to commuting and foraging badgers and maintain surrounding foraging resources are recommended. I've got an additional recommendation to incorporate the native planting into the proposed development, which would be beneficial to badgers. So at one point we're saying the site doesn't affect it, and then we're saying it's on a badger site. Would it be feasible to ask, could the development been sited somewhere else in the field where badgers wouldn't have been affected at all? Because it was a site visit, it was a large field. And I know that the applicants, I think basically the objectors' complaint was it was right in front of their building, the site, the development. But it was a huge field. Would it be possible to site it somewhere else in the field that didn't affect badgers?
Right.
Thanks, Councillor Blackwood. I mean, the decision for the committee today is to make a determination of what's before them in terms of the proposal, which is to locate the outbuilding within a specified area of the field. So that's your consideration today. I suppose the other point is that badgers are very, very transient. So what's observed through one badger survey doesn't necessarily follow through another. The most up-to-date position from our point of view is a survey carried out on the 27th of January this year, which is summarised in paragraph 8. And in terms of recommended condition 6, I think it is requiring a further survey no earlier than 2 months prior to development commencing. That's not unusual to require a pre-construction survey, particularly in relation to a transient species where situations could change. So that's a very common condition that you will see in these types of situations, and that's a condition which is recommended through the most current survey carried out by WSP.
Okay.
Convener, based on that, could I move refusal of the application?
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor. I think, in fairness to Councillor McCluskey, desire to move rejection of the application. So if Councillor Blackwood is happy to second.
I think Councillor McCluskey might want to grant.
Aye. Convener, I was obviously I listened to the thing, mate, if I'm allowed back in, but I was moving granted the application. I'm very sympathetic to people taking an interest in badgers because through me representing about 13 villages, I'm also interested in their welfare. And badgers seem to be thriving in that area, so I'm not concerned about loss of the habitat area, the 1 wee corner for the thingway. My biggest concern and frustrates me over the years is I see several dead badgers every year, and it's always at the same bits where obviously they're crossing the road. And I just don't understand why we're more proactive, the wildlife groups, in putting culverts under the road to enable the badgers to cross the road. So I take it very seriously, and I thank the objectors for their interest in the well-being of the badgers. But I've never heard anything today new or to restrict the application, to refuse the application, sadly. It's clearly, everything that's come up today. It wasn't a surprise that the lawyer supported the applicant. I think that's 100% normal where they come in. And as I say, I don't see anything to merit refusal. The planners have considered every aspect here. And, I think, the most recent survey has proved that although it's outside the distance, there is badgers in the area, and to put in the other change to get some planting in that area is very, very welcome. And as I say, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendations with that amendment in it.
Okay, apologies for the issue of which way you were voting. My fault entirely. Anyone else? At the moment we have a motion, Councillor McCluskey, to accept the recommendations and a motion to reject the application. No seconders for either.
We've got Councillor Nimmo, then Bounce, then Hughes.
Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Bowes, then Councillor Hughes.
Thanks very much, Convener. I think based on the information we have in front of us and what we've heard this morning, I'm content to second Councillor McCluskey on this occasion. I think it's the right decision to grant. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. My question is going to be just a little bit of clarity to Mr. Henderson, who I've got to say is one of the most balanced people that I've ever met, and I don't think he comes in on anybody's side, and I don't think that was quite the correct statement to make. Ian, you spoke at length there. It was the usual legal talk, as the saying goes. On the matter of the land thing, I think James, our Councillor Kerr, if he wishes it prefers, sort of explored that a bit with you. Trying to make it quite simple is, if we grant, this can get challenged, and it's likely to get challenged on the ground of the submission of the land document not being correct. Would that be what you were saying? Although maybe more extended, but was that what you were saying?
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. I think you've summed that up quite well. What I was trying to do was kind of explain the position that land ownership typically isn't a material consideration, but the land certification and notification process is a statutory process that should be followed. Now, where we seem to be, and I've not seen the title deeds, is we've got dispute between objectors and the applicant as to whether the land certificate is correct. Now, the point I was also making is that the land certification is important from primarily two aspects. It's required by statute, but it's important so that a landowner knows that their land may be affected by a planning permission. And in particular, that can affect a party if they were, say, selling their land and were unaware that it had the benefit of permission. And it's also important from the perspective that they have an opportunity to submit representations on the application. And it was on that basis that I also made the point that I suspect we don't have a position as matters sit that we have a landowner that's unaware of the application. So I suspect if the certification is not correct and could potentially be challenged if an objector wanted to do that, and that would actually be an objector that had a notifiable interest under the certification. If they wanted to do that, I suspect an argument that would be made is that in response to that, which is that representations were submitted and opportunities were available for the parties concerned to understand the application and make representations to the planning authority and indeed to the planning committee, as took place today. But yes, it could potentially be the case that there's a technical error here, and it would then be for the parties concerned to determine whether or not they wish to take that forward as a challengeable position and whether their lawyers would indeed believe that was a solid basis to seek a challenge. So I don't know if that helps you, Councillor Bowes.
As ever, Mr. Henderson, you can say something in 20 lines that I think in two, but I got the gist of it. Going on to and this is considering, because I'm looking where I'm going with this. Jim Blackwood had obviously had asked about if could they reapply at another point. I'm assuming this was probably going to Bernard rather than anybody else. If they decide to put it in another part of the field, I assume then that would be a separate application from the one that we're currently sitting with.
I suppose, yes, you're quite right. If there was a materially different proposal that the applicant wished to pursue, that would be a fresh application.
Okay. Right, so I'll tell you where I am. I'm going to second Councillor Blackwood, and the reason for it is one, I've discounted the building itself and how it's made up. I get that that's not a material consideration from the fact of the equine side of it. It's quite clear in the report that's not a planning consideration in this situation. However, in reading the reports, and part of it is to do with the badgers, because an amount of it, one of the reports talks about a lot of there's a number of holes where the badgers have been basically snorting into the ground to forage for food, so that's part of it. The other part of it is that I don't know that to approve is going to be a sound decision anyway, because I do believe it'll get challenged and probably get potentially, so I'll put it a better way, potentially get overturned later. And with all those in mind, I've got to say I'm happy to second Councillor Blackwood.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor?
Ian first, is that okay?
Okay, we'll go back. Ian, can you clarify the points raised by Councillor Bowes? They are still outstanding.
You're on mute.
Apologies, convener. Apologies, Councillor McCluckie. It happens once in every meeting, it would appear. I was just picking up on the point that we appear now to have a motion to refuse and an amendment to grant. Now, in terms of a motion to refuse contrary to officers' recommendations, we really need to establish the reasons for that, and it was just I think it would be worthwhile exploring that a little bit further. The note I have here is essentially that, and just to clarify the point that Councillor Bowes said, I don't think we would refuse on the grounds that there could be the potential for a future court challenge. I don't think that would be a planning ground that we would refuse on that basis. But that said, what I have a note of is that there would be a refusal on the grounds of a kind of adverse impact on the ecology of the area. I wanted to confirm if that was the correct reasoning from what members have said, and if that is indeed the only basis on which members would be looking to move refusal.
I think being reasonable, and sorry, Jim, I'll talk. You can speak for yourself on it, but I am putting a bit more weight on my concerns. That when you actually read the various reports in it, and I know there is 3 badger reports already in it, so I'm adding a lot. I'm taking a little bit more weight on that.
Yeah,
Ian, sorry, Ian, I was quite happy with your wording there.
Thank you, Councillor, and just double checking the policy position. Brent or Bernard, would you be able to perhaps consider the policy position around that and explain that to the committee, and perhaps consider if there's a wording that may be agreed by the councillors concerned?
It's something to think about just now, but at this point in time, we haven't heard it from all of the members. So we don't know just exactly what position the members will adopt. So it's for the objectors, fine. There's time now to consider the grounds in which your decisions to be taken. But I'd like to hear from Councillor Hughes, Councillor Murtaugh, as to this application.
Thank you, convener. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions in relation to clarification. Councillor Blackwood has pointed out that we have in paragraph 7 and paragraph 8 2 conflicting perspectives in relation to the badgers. Can I ask, under paragraph 8, that we're talking about general mitigating measures? Well, obviously, if we've asked for a report, then obviously from a planning point of view, we would be would obviously have to look at mitigation measures. Could I ask someone from the planning department or even Mr. Henderson, what is the definition of general mitigation measures in relation to badgers? I'm assuming, would I be correct in assuming that badgers are a protected species?
Yeah, I can perhaps answer that. Yes, that's correct. Councillor Hughes, badgers are a protected species. In relation to the recommendation in the WSP report in relation to adherence to general mitigation measures, it's really mitigation which would apply through the construction process. There's a suite of recommendations in the report in relation to those measures, and they would include things like containing the spread of the construction-related activity, so it's confined to a smaller area as possible to minimise impact on the foraging area for badgers. Mitigation in relation to the use of artificial light, restriction of hours of operation of construction machinery, and covering of any trenches, holes, or pits at night, so that badgers potentially wouldn't get trapped in those features. So yeah, that's to give you a flavour for the type of mitigation that would apply. On top of that, there's a compensatory mitigation measure post construction that would apply, and that's in relation to additional planting to be provided, which would be a benefit to the badgers who forage on that site.
Thank you, Bernard. Can I just ask, as badgers are a protected species, I think it might be Mr. Henderson. We heard from one of the objectors in relation to badgers that there was a need for a certificate of some kind to if you were working within 30 meters of badgers. And also in another section I heard this morning that you needed a special license in relation to badgers. Would these come under mitigation circumstances? And could I ask, if these are not under the planning rules, who would actually give these certificates or grant them in relation to development?
Can I perhaps answer that one?
I'm just looking for clarification.
Yeah.
See if we can get you that.
For a license to disturb is required from Nature Scott. If there's likely to be disturbance within 30 meters of a badger set, the application site is beyond 30 meters of a set, so it wouldn't be considered there would be any disturbance, any direct disturbance, and therefore a license from Nature Scott wouldn't be required in this instance.
Right. Can I ask, in terms of the 30 meters, would this development be within the 30 meters of what might be the badger's habitat?
Well, it's within it's a small part of a field which badgers forage on. That in itself doesn't trigger a requirement for a license from Nature Scott. But as you'll note from the recommendations in the report, because it is a foraging area that is affected, there's construction-related mitigation and compensatory measures proposed for planting, which would be of interest and benefit to the badgers.
I was just wondering, it was just a thought crossed my mind that did we actually approach Nature Scotland for their view?
Nature Scott, for such a small development of this type, would simply refer us to their standard advice. They wouldn't provide specific comments in relation to an application of this relatively small scale.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question in relation to horses? In terms of planning, does the planning department have any policies relating to horses which may have been published? In other words, do we have a policy relating to horses?
Ian,
Councillor, perhaps I can come in and clarify on that point for you, Councillor Hughes. There's no specific policy in the development plan relating to horses. A couple of points in relation to the questions that you've raised there. Also, just to clarify, the application that's before the committee is for an outbuilding. It's not specifically mentioned as being solely for the keeping of horses. Also, just to clarify, in relation to some of the other points you were raising there, that similar to other applications, planning permission is only, as is often the case, one consent or permission that's required. If a planning permission was granted by the planning committee, there's other consenting processes that a development has to go through to be built, such as we're saying in here. In this case, there's potentially a requirement for a license from Nature Scott, requirements for building warrants. Those are separate consenting processes which should be looked at independently of the planning application in consideration and determination of a planning application.
Thank you.
Thanks, convener, and I had some questions about that matter that Bernard has spoken about and the badges, but I think they've been covered. In the question of size, scale, material, the sympathy with the area that's been raised, I mean, I see within the conditions there are, a number of, that there would have to be a submission of, the materials and, to come back before, any construction commences. But I think, although it's an application for an outbuilding, not specific to horses, etc., and that's what we've got to look at the classification. I suppose it's what that building is within the character of the area, and that question has been raised, and I think officers have judged it to be a suitable building, but can more comment be given about its how it's going to sit relative to the environment within, and what, when it says the materials will have to be provided, at this stage we are not able to judge that, whether it would then have a detrimental visual impact that would give us concern that would be a material consideration, if it's being judged after the event. So can officers kind of outline the thinking behind how that then is judged and what's suitable? How will that be looked at in terms of us granting planning permission and then coming back in the conditions?
Yep, sorry, Councillor, I'm just scrolling through the report, the original report to committee, because it gives an indication of the proposed materials, if you just bear with me. Okay, so it's a 140 square metre outbuilding, a height of 4.6 metres. External finishes would be proposed as green profiled metal sheeting and grey painted blockwork. So in principle, we've accepted those proposed finishes. The condition would really just be in relation to the specific detail. well, primarily probably in terms of the colour or the type of green proposed. The sheeting itself we've accepted through our assessment in the report. I mean, there's obviously an element of context to this. We've assessed it as a relatively modest sized building. Yes, it's utilitarian, but that's in keeping with many farm related buildings that you would see in the area. We've made the comment that much larger agricultural type buildings are essentially permitted development without any need for planning permission. So there is that planning context to factor in, and we've also taken into account that the building would essentially would appear within an existing cluster of buildings. It wouldn't be an isolated development. There's cut and fill involved to set it into the site, and there's planting proposed which would assist to mitigate the visual impact on their neighbours, while also recognising there's no wider landscape impacts because it's a relatively discrete location in the wider setting.
I mean, obviously, I think the thing is that, I sort of had expected that if that was being given as an additional condition, that it was something different to what had originally been submitted, I suppose, because, if the recommendation was based on what was already there and there's no change, then I'm not sure, why it is listed as an additional condition. But although I take the point that it is an outbuilding and that, there are larger agricultural buildings that in particular settings which can go under permitted development, I think there is an element that it is a slightly different character of siting that we're looking at here because of the residential nature, and I think that does have to be taken into account. I'm not sure that the materials from a layperson's eye sit as sympathetically as what it is, seen from planning terms. I think that is a concern. I can understand why those within the objectors in the area would raise that, and I would be more comfortable if there was more of an oversight into or more specification as to making it more sympathetic than the kind of blockwork and metal sheeting that's just been described, and there was a way of softening that more to be more in keeping with the area, which I think it does give me additional concern as to adding on to the points that Councillor Bowes and Councillor Blackwood have raised. So I just wanted to clarify that there was no additional things that were proposed to say, it's grant, but it has to be brought more in keeping. It is just grant, and planners would be minded to accept the previous specification as it's laid out. I just wanted to clarify that, Convener. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Just the subject on badgers is probably a major part of this. I think the officers have addressed the other issues, and there's, I don't know if it was Councillor Blackwood or Councillor Bowes mentioned the amount of surveys we done on the badgers. Can I get Brent or Bernard to confirm out the 3 surveys or 4 surveys, whatever it is, has any of them stated that this development couldn't go ahead in their submissions?
Just to confirm, there was an original badger survey carried out by the applicant, which concluded that badgers aren't a constraint on the proposed development. There's also been the more recent survey carried out by WSP, commissioned by the council, which came to a similar conclusion and recommended the mitigation that we've already discussed this morning. Beyond those two formal survey reports that we've reviewed, there were site visits carried out by the council's countryside rangers. That's both of them. The first ranger visited the site in her capacity as a worker for Scottish Badgers, and while she wasn't visiting the site at the request of the planning department, or as I understand it, specifically looking at the application, she did conclude that the field was a prime foraging site for badgers. There was a subsequent visit by the other countryside ranger, and she essentially came to the same conclusion based on her site inspection that the applicant's badger survey report was acceptable.
Okay, Brent, just a final question. The company WSP, how much does that cost the council?
Councillor Kerr, can I come in there?
Yeah.
I don't have the figure to hand for the cost of that survey, but we can provide that to you separately if that's required.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Thank you, convener.
Anyone else?
To the vote.
Okay, we go to the vote now. Ian, you take us through that process.
Thank you. I forgot to unmute myself again. Convener, I think I mentioned earlier that it might be helpful for the planning officers, maybe Bernard or Brent, to look at the proposed refusal reasons in terms of, well, I think the wording that I had noted was, and I suspect it relates to policy PE19, biodiversity and geodiversity, that the application would be refused on the grounds that it is considered contrary to that policy on the basis of its adverse impact on the ecology of the area. I don't know if a decision would also perhaps say something along the lines of in particular in relation to badgers. I don't know what my planning colleagues think and whether it's maybe worth running through the other policy considerations quickly that might be relevant to this. Thank you, convener.
Convener, if I could just come in on that in relation to the points that Ian's just raised there. I would agree on the basis of the motion to refuse. It does, as Ian said, appear to be that members' reason for that would be that the application is contrary to policy PE19. From the debate, what I was picking up was that the view seemed to be that members aren't satisfied that it's been adequately demonstrated that the proposed development would not have an adverse impact.
Yes, I agree very much with what's been said with regards to the direction the 10 members have taken. And the clarification of the points that you've raised, Bernard, that have been received, been made, and have been made clear. So, irrespective of which way members divide, made clear. I think that has to be emphasised. The complex issue is. You can just go to the vote.
Thank you, convener. I'm happy to take matters through the vote. What we have is a motion by Councillor Blackwood, seconded by Councillor Bowes, and that is to refuse the grant of planning permission and that would be on the grounds that the matter is considered contrary to policy PE 19, biodiversity and geodiversity, and on the basis that members of the committee are not satisfied that it has been demonstrated that the application would not have an adverse impact on the ecology of the area, and in particular in relation to badgers. And we then have an amendment by Councillor McCluckie, which was seconded by Councillor Nimmo, and that was to grant permission in accordance with officer recommendations. So turning to members by way of roll call, Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Provost Buchanan. Sorry, Provost Buchanan, I think. you mean-
Motion. Motion.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Blackwood.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
And Councillor Grant, I don't believe is on the meeting. I think he's absent. Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
And Councillor Kerr.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
Motion.
Councillor McCluckie.
Amendment.
Councillor Murtagh. Sorry, Councillor Murtagh. Sorry, I think are you muted at the moment? I think from reading your lips, were you saying motion? You can nod if that was the case. Motion. Councillor Nichols absent. Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Thank you. And we have 7 votes for the motion and 3 for the amendment. So the motion is duly carried. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on then to item 5, engineering operation, putting landfill for Mr. and Mrs. Hillary, Glen Road, Torwood. Julie, is one of your applications, Julie?
As convener, thank you very much. As you said, this is application P210437 full, and it relates to proposed development at Torwood Quarry. There's extensive planning history associated with this site, and members will see that it's summarised in section 3.1 to section 3.21 of the committee report before you. Planning permission P090771 full is the most relevant application to this current application, as it approved a restoration plan for the former quarry. Planning permission was granted for that 2009 application in 2011, and restoration at the site is not yet completed. This new application relates to an engineering operation to increase ground levels in part of the former quarry, and the plan that you can see just now is the area that is in black, and the wider area that is outlined in blue is the entirety of the former quarry. You'll see that the area that is proposed to do further infilling activities is to the rear and side of some of the residential properties, including Oakview and Hillview. Bernard, can you perhaps show some of the photographs of the site? A supporting statement was not submitted from the applicant despite our request, and the applicant has indicated that he seeks to justify this application for further infilling activities on the basis of making the land more amenable and ecological. In considering this new application, members should note that there are enforcement issues with the applicant's wider site, and this includes the formation of an access track to the lower quarry, presumably to allow access for infilling activities associated with this application. The levels shown on this track do not accord with approved site levels. SEPA also have a current investigation as materials were imported to create that access track, mentioned without seeking an exemption. This application is assessed as being contrary to the development plan. The application proposes an importation of a significant quantity of new materials to raise the land above that agreed by the approved restoration plan. It's considered that the new gradients would result in an area of land which would appear an engineered platform and would visually jar with the character and level of surrounding countryside. It's also noted that the new proposal does not include any landscaping. Concerns additionally are also raised in relation to the impact on adjoining residential properties as a result of noise and disturbance. In this instance, it's considered that any benefit of development to the applicant would not outweigh the impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties and the character and appearance of the surrounding rural area. It's recommended that Planning Committee refuse planning permission for the reasons contained in the committee report. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thanks very much. You've heard Julie. Any comments?
The Provost.
Provost?
Aye, thank you, Convener. Convener, I'm one of the local members for the area, and it was me that called this in. Now, members that have been on the committee for some time would realise that we've been out there on site on a few occasions. The last time we were out there was for an application for a house which was refused. At that particular time we were out there, there was a lot of concern relating to the access and the fact that this applicant still had an opportunity to bring in lorry after lorry to that area. Now, to be honest with you, I'm a wee bit concerned about the recommendation, in so much as that my own personal opinion is that anything that would support the visual impact to this area and improve it and enhance it, I think should be supported. But there is a number of councillors on this committee at the moment that have never been there, and I think it would be an ideal opportunity for a site visit here before we take any decision, and I would formally move a site. Thank you very much, Convener.
Okay.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I'm quite happy to support the Provost's submission there. I was concerned that this is a vast area and no being able to see it previous to this. I think that's a great suggestion, and the footage helped the new there, and I don't know how many times I've asked for this footage to be included in the report, which is great going forward, and we've said on numerous occasions we'll get it done. It's still not happened. I'd like to hope that for the new council that'll be possible. It doesn't need to be in the paper report. If it's in the members' shares, I think it'll be advantageous to the new members who come in. Convener. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor. I think it's straightforward. It was always our favourite way this was Torwood, no more about Torwood now than I ever knew. But here what's been said, I have no problems with the site inspection. At this point in time, I'd be against the application being approved. Since we're at the end of that particular process. But was to stay so. But it's important that members say, and if it's felt that there should be a meeting of some sort, site inspection, it's fine, no problem.
We just need to check if there's general agreement.
Content with that particular position now.
It's just going to clarify if it's included.
Great.
Convener, can I just check what type of site meeting? Is it similar to the one we had the last time with just officers and questions? It's
Yeah.
not actually a full hearing.
No, unaccompanied site visit.
Thank
That
you.
would be fine.
Just
Thank
that what wasn't clear.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. Agreed.
Great.
Very much.
Convener, apologies, it's Ian Henderson. It's just noting that we have a date for site visits on the 28th of the month. that's also the day on which licensing board is due to take place. So while we could have a site visit, what we wouldn't be able to do that day is come back to then determine the matter following the site visit. So I was wondering if what the committee would be agreeing there would be to have a site visit unaccompanied to view the physical characteristics, and to delegate to officers to arrange a time for a committee meeting at which that matter could be determined. I think notionally we were looking at a date around the 8th of April, but that would need to be clarified for availability of all parties. But is that something that the committee would be agreeable to?
Oh, yeah, we just love that.
Yeah.
I think it's a notion. The we have discretion in terms of the what's available of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
date. So I'm going to leave it at the moment so we can find a date.
Through yourself, convener, it might be an opportunity maybe to we had another planning after the site. We have another planning committee. It might be an opportunity then to bring to that committee some applications that are still outstanding but might be ready for that time. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, as I say, we have discretion in terms of the dates. I would suggest we ask officers to me about the dates as quickly as possible, and we'll take it from there.
Convener, can I just say that we could leave it up to yourself and the deputy convener and officers if that's suitable to use.
That's fine.
Fine.
Appreciate that.
Fine.
Okay.
Convener, Councillor Mutter had their hand up.
Sorry, Mutter.
Well, it was just to clarify, because I think it is about whether what is possible and realistic. I mean, what I wouldn't want is for us to agree a site visit and then it's not being able to be brought back until it's a future committee. And I think that's my main question is it going to be feasible to have another planning committee, regardless of whether it's just this one item or others added on? Because I think it's kind of an important question about the timing of the site, or whether it's what we're agreeing is that we're just agreeing to go to sites future and it's a future committee that go.
I think that any move to sites, we have to have be of understanding that that's conducted before the recess and the new council taking office. So it would be one for the new council, unless, of course, we can guarantee the dates that we select. And again, it'll go open for discussion. The selection of the dates, discussion, and I would hope that the committee would be able to, first and myself and the provost, to come up with dates as soon as.
Right. That's a very good point, convener, that Councillor Murtagh has brought up, and I'm quite sure that through your good self and the officers that we'll come up with a date that will be suitable for everybody and an opportunity to deal with these matters before a new council comes in. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Next item.
Next item is the construction of the associated development, including stables, north end of Holden Limited, Blackness. Joy.
Thank you, convener. It's myself again. As you rightly say, this is a planning application for Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, P210522 full. Bernard, can you show the plans and the photographs for this application, if you're able to, please? So this application relates to the development of a dwelling house with garage, stables and land for horse grazing. The proposed development would be located in open countryside at the Manorstone Holdings area of Blackness. The consultation responses are summarised in section 4 of the committee report, and no issues in principle were raised by consultees. Blackness Community Council object to the application and their comments are detailed in section 5 of the committee report. 7 objections and 2 letters of support were received, as summarised in section 6 of the committee report. Comments were received, including in relation to road safety, impact on the rural character of the area, drainage, non-compliance with the development plan, the planning history of the local area, and general support for the application. The application is assessed as being contrary to the development plan and Falkirk Council supplementary planning guidance with specific reference to development in the countryside. It's considered that the proposed development would not respect the settlement pattern of built development in the Blackness holdings area and would represent an incongruous form of development which would have an unacceptable landscape impact. The proposed development does not fit with any of the criteria where housing and development in the countryside is acceptable, and there are no planning considerations identified in this instance which would justify the proposed development. It's recommended that the Planning Committee refuse planning permission for the reasons detailed at section 9 of the committee report. I think Bernard might be having a wee problem with displaying the plans.
Apologies, it's just taking a little while to load. I should be able to do that in a moment, if you can just bear with me.
Yeah.
So Councillor Bowes had his hand up, so you could check him with him.
Councillor Bowes, you have a question?
No, it's not so much a question, convener. Having read this report and the reasons for refusal, I would like to move the recommendations as laid out by the officers.
We have 2 deputations that have already been agreed in terms of the hearing. So if you can hang on to that particular
Certainly.
motion,
Sorry, convener, I'm too quick with it.
that's okay. Please.
Convener, I hope you were able to see those. I can display them again if members wish to see them.
Appreciate that. No, that's the other one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Julie, this is one of your applications.
So I think we'll just check out the deputations for me, just for me,
Okay.
if that's okay.
I remember recalling that we have a commitment to hearing 2 deputations. And we'll hear those after we hear from Joy. Yeah. But it was community council, the first of the organisations that have submitted a request for yeah. Yeah. There's some Blackness.
Supposed to be Karen Terry.
Karen and Terry.
Second. Apologies, convener. Can I just double check, are any representatives of Blackness and Community Council present on the call? I think, convener, that's a no. In which case, if the committee has agreed to hear the deputations, we would move on to the project architect, Ailey Isett.
Okay, Ailey.
Hi there.
Hi. How are you? Sorry to keep you waiting. The The normal procedure is that, as you're the main objector, you have 10 minutes. And
Apologies to yourself, convener, to the committee, and also in particular to Ms. Isaac for interrupting the start of her presentation there. I believe actually there's a technical issue with having the representatives of the Community Council attend at the moment, so I would beg your indulgence for a 5-minute adjournment. Allow me to resolve that matter, and then we'd be able to hear the deputations in the listed order. So I am sorry about that, but if you could bear with me for those 5 minutes, please.
It's fine with me.
Through yourself, Chair. They're not in the paper saying that there are going to be deputations here. Was it a late submission?
Apologies, Councillor Kerr. This application was dealt with as a supplementary agenda. These deputations were received in time, but they were out with the initial agenda issue.
Thank you, Mr. Frawley. Thanks, convener.
Hello, Ms. Walker. Just to let you know, the committee is currently adjourned, and just offer you my apologies for the issue with the invite there. And I'll just make sure the same link goes to Terry just now.
Terry, if you could, yeah, we were watching on YouTube, and yeah, we'd been watching out for something to join and couldn't. We've never done this before, so yeah, thank you.
No, I apologise for making it more difficult than you needed it to be.
That's fine. So presumably once it comes off, Terry. Jack, are you still there?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, right. No, it's okay. I'm a bit confused between the YouTube link and the Cisco WebEx link. So will I automatically join into the meeting as soon as you unadjourn it?
Yes, that's right, Ms. Walker. So once Terry's able to join on the same link I sent you, I forwarded on to herself.
Right.
We'll be able to get restarted once everyone's in place. And it'll be the Cisco window that you're using.
Sorry, I get an echo.
Do you by any chance still have the YouTube feed running?
Yes.
I would recommend closing that down.
Okay. Right, let me see if I can figure this out. Oh, jeez, I've got you coming twice.
Is anyone from Blackness Communications with us? Right, at the bottom there. Normal procedure is that you have 10 minutes. And how you split that was 2 speakers with 5 minutes or 1 speaker with 10 minutes. It's up to yourself. Yeah. But was yours, right? Is your wish?
I think Karen wanted to start, but Karen seems to have dropped off my screen. Has Karen? Have we lost Karen?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
We hear you, Karen. And we can see you.
think Karen would like to start. Karen?
Okay, Karen, floor is yours.
It seems to, Karen has just sent me a text to say that the site seemed to have rejected her. Can we come back to Karen?
Yeah, surely.
No, I think Karen's having a problem, a large problem, and she wanted to address the major issues, which obviously we have already sent in writing to the council, explaining on the various parts of the local development plan where it clearly breaches the local development plan. I asked if I could also speak.
Frozen.
Would you like me to continue just now on the issue that I wish to raise?
I think, Ms. Rowland, the proposal from the convener just now is that we alter the order of business and that we, as a committee, will move to item 7 and hear that now. And in the meantime, I'll liaise with Ms. Walker to get her back into the meeting to allow you to be able to make your deputation in full. So I'd be grateful if you could just stay on the call for now. I'll liaise with Ms. Walker, and in the meantime, the committee will consider item 7. Thank you.
Councillors? Item 7 is the extension to dwelling house. Patterson Road, Bates, Pocket, for Henry. Really?
Thank you, convener. It's myself, Kevin Brown, presenting that today.
Kevin.
This is a detailed application proposing a large first floor extension to a single-storey detached bungalow at Maddiston Road in Brighton. I wonder, yeah, thanks Bernard. Perhaps if we could show the proposed plan and then maybe flick through the photographs, that would be the most useful probably. So that's a proposed plan. The proposal includes the replacement of the existing pitched slate roof with a flat roof box dormer style extension covering the majority of the roof area and being finished in fiberglass composite timber cladding and slate. The proposal has not generated any objections during the course of the application process, and the local community council has not commented on the proposal. The proposal is assessed as being contrary to the terms of the Falkirk Local Development Plan 2 and associated supplementary planning guidance by virtue of the proposed development being overly large in scale and of a design which is largely out of character with the existing house and the surrounding area. The officer recommendation in this instance is for Planning Committee to refuse planning permission for the reasons set out in section 9 of the report. Thank you.
From the storeroom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that is a request from Mr. Ray himself. Did you hear that? Yeah. Mr. Ray, can you hear me? Mr. Ray?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Unfortunately, I couldn't hear what this gentleman said. Something seemed to have gone wrong, so I'm assuming that everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing myself and Gordon Binning here, who's soon to be my son-in-law, to talk with you today. We had a look at the scale thing, and it appeared that with objection it was too large, but the present property is 151.7 square metres. The proposed extension is 78.4. The purpose of the building is to create a living area for me where I am and a living area for my family up above, my daughter Gordon and my 2 grandchildren. And as to the surrounding area and the buildings in the surrounding area, I've lived here for 36 years, so I know the area well. Just a few years ago, 3 new builds were built at the back of the Grange. There's also Dr. Kerr's old house, which is a 2-storey building, which is quite substantial, just across from mine at an angle of about 45 degrees. If you go down the hill, less than 150 metres away, there's a telephone exchange. Just down from the telephone exchange, a block of 3-storey flats were built a few years ago. If you proceed on down the hill and you pass the Masonic Hall, in between Masonic Hall and the local pub, there's a new build there that's been built, and the finish on it is nothing like anything in the area. The finished brickwork does not look anything like anything here. And if you sorry, this is one of the reasons we want them to move in. But if you continue down the hill and you go around the corner, carrying down the Madison Road towards the roundabout at the prison, you find that most of the houses there have dormers that are full width. But I'd like to raise a few other points that seem to come up on the feasibility drawing. It is not a flat roof, it is a sloping roof. If you look at the feasibility drawings, it's not flat. We can send these drawings to you just now if you wish. I can't read this without my glasses on. Sorry, there's a shallow pitch in all directions. The cladding we would propose would be slate to match the existing, which would come off the existing building when the building was taking effect. The walls are not on the perimeter walls of the building, they're set in from it. They do not stand on the existing outside walls. There are no gables in the building. All windows, it was stated that the windows in the drawing were not matching the ones below. All windows in the drawings are directly above the existing ground floor windows. If you go up the hill, there's Jim Kelly's house, which is a Dutch barn style. And if you care to look across the park, just to get a feel for the area, there's a 60s style new build. And down past the manse, there are 3 60s style houses set in from the road. So it's not as if all the houses in this area are the same type. There's a tremendous mixture of houses in this area. I'm sorry, I've got a cough. I've got asbestosis. That's why they want to move in with me. The reason for moving on medical grounds is since my wife passed away in 2018, the 26th of May at approximately 10 o'clock in the morning, I've been 999'd into the hospital on 3 occasions, and I can give evidence for that. I know it's not relevant to building, but that's the case we were making, you know, that several buildings have been put up in the area, especially what's the name of that one down there, Gordon? West Bray.
Yes.
That's 2.5 stories high. And the finish on it doesn't blend in with anything in the street. When the drawings came out, our neighbours actually talked to us about it, and they actually said they thought it enhanced the building. They thought it was. One woman said she thought it was beautiful. The woman who lives in the Grange. So I can't see what the objection is. There may be some things you would like us to change. We have no objection to that. I'm quite happy to have a slate finish all the way around, and I'm quite happy to do away with the balcony at the front. But I don't see why it's objectionable considering the mixture of houses we have in this area. Sorry, Gordon.
I think that's pretty much all that we were interested in there.
I apologise for my coughing, I can't help it.
Yep, I think that's our case.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you for allowing us.
Thank you for listening.
No problem. The professional development from the objectives and the sorry, what was the members? Any questions? First of all, to the application itself and Mr. Benny, any questions there for them particular at this point in time? Is that fair?
No, convener, no questions for the deputation.
Any questions for officers? Yes, Martha.
Yeah, so question for officer, on what's been being raised there, I mean, can a condition be attached that isn't obviously then making it a, you know, a whole new application, where there could be further discussion about specification and finishes that would bring more into line with recommendation, well, what would be permitted. I think I recall many different applications in that kind of area. I wouldn't at any point think that a justification for perhaps a poor planning decision, or I'm not judging previous planning decisions, but decisions where we can't necessarily see them being in keeping should be a justification for others. But I think it's a fair point. There is a very diverse mix of housing and finishes. So would there be conditions without having to go back to the drawing board that could be added to this to make it more in keeping with some of the points that have been raised?
Oh, and the scenario that you just raised yourself, can perhaps be even more specific? The conditions you would like to see implemented.
If I can come in there,
This is one for Laura, sorry.
Well, I mean, if I can hear from Kevin and I can elaborate it depending on whether, because I don't know if he's got the gist of what I'm meaning in terms of the issues that's been raised by the applicant themselves.
Yeah, I think so. So it is open to members to look to, if they were minded to support the proposal, they could look to apply planning conditions to control the material finishes on the proposed development. During the course of the assessment of this application, consideration was given to whether or not amendments could be made to the proposal in its current form, which would allow officers to support the proposal under the course of this planning application. We took the view, we felt that any changes that would be required to be made to make it acceptable in planning terms, design terms, and make it accord with the development supplementary planning guidance, we felt those changes would be so significant that it would warrant the need for a fresh planning application and couldn't necessarily be made during the course of this application. But obviously, if members are of mind to take a slightly different view and support the proposal, in general terms, they could, if they wish, apply planning conditions to seek to alter the finishes on the proposed.
I suppose, I mean, that's my question, is that, you know, in general terms, I would have expected them to be not so much outlined, obviously, if you were looking to grant, but it's whether, why are they so significant? What in specific terms did you find was so significant that, you know, if I was going to be listing a number of conditions, I'll go down that route, but what did officers feel was so significant that would have meant that it would need a whole new planning application, is my question, really.
And in my opinion, the proposed extension is significantly out of character with not only the existing dwelling house, but the immediate surrounding dwelling houses and the predominant that stretch of the road where it's single story. With, yes, there are some dormer windows on there, but certainly not covering the full roof in the form that's proposed here. So the site is actually quite a large site, has quite a lot of land to the rear of the property. It would have been my initial thought would have been perhaps to have explored alternative accommodation to the rear of the property at a lower level, which would have allowed for a similar amount of accommodation to be provided, whilst minimising the impacts on the street scene and the character of the area. That in itself would be quite a significant change, obviously, from what's proposed at the moment, all at first floor level. And we would take the view that would really need to be done as a fresh application as opposed to an amendment to this one.
Indeed, if it was going to be a different part of the plot itself, totally. I'll see what other members think. I think I'm not convinced, because the character of the area is quite varied, that it would necessarily be something which would be, well, this is so out of character, specifically just this house, that it would merit refusal. I'd like to hear what other members of the committee say, but potentially whether officers could think of potential, if we were minded to grant things which would enhance in terms of the aesthetics, if there were things that we were going to put on a condition. Thanks. I'll hand over to others.
It'd be helpful if we ran the photographs. I'm not opinion on that one.
So are you coming back to me there, convener?
Yes, I will be.
No, I think I'd quite like to hear from other members of the committee first, and then and see where the
photographs first, and then we'll go up to this. I don't see. Councillor Kerr, 2 or 3, somebody here, and well, Bernard, photographs. Your contribution? Actually,
I'll just get my submission, convener. I understand Kevin's views on this, but as one of the local members, I'm quite happy with the applicant's proposals, and that there is mitigating circumstances regarding other developments in the area that I think would be mitigated to pass this. So I've no hesitation in proposing that we accept the proposal, convener, of the applicant, and I'm not concerned about this area, as already been stated. So quite happy to support.
So happy to second that.
Convener, I'm happy to support this proposal. I'm another local member from that ward, and I think the applicant put a very good history of the area in his deputation, in his summary. It's unbelievable that the 3-storey flats that got built in the middle of that street further down next to the telephone chains, I mean, it wouldn't have been Cape Monaghan in Scotland, let alone, I don't know why it got granted. And we also, the one next to the Masonic, that we disagreed with the members as well, because next door had more impact than, which is already got planning, than the proposal there. So I don't see this as being such an impact to the area, and he's explained the reason. He was even accepting that for some minor changes. It's not a flat roof, like he said, so we certainly sometimes hey, water leakages that and flat roofs, but if it's sort of slight soap in it, that's fine. Unlike Councillor Kerr, I'm quite happy to leave it to the director if there's a couple of minor changes. But the fact is, support the application in principle, and if it's something to do with the materials that feel would lessen the impact, then that could be, we could leave that with the director. But I have it's no the end of the world going with Councillor Kerr and proposing it as is.
Anyone else? You're confused.
Thank you, convener. Being the other elected member for Upper Braes, I called the application in for committee's consideration. Having heard the deputation from Mr. Ray, I think he made excellent points this morning in relation to his presentation and the application. And having listened to Councillor Kerr and Councillor McCluckie, I think that there should be a 3-line whip in Upper Braes, and I am completely, shall we say, in agreement with the comments of Councillor Kerr and Councillor McCluckie.
Okay, anyone else?
Agreed.
Agreed. Ian, do you want to clarify again?
Yeah, thank you. It's not to second guess anything that's just been decided. It was just to clarify in terms of the decision, as I mentioned earlier, where there's a motion which is not in accord with officers' recommendations. It's important to make sure that we're clear on the reasons. And the note that I've got here, and please, Councillors Kerr and McCluckie, interrupt me if I am incorrect on this. But I have a note that you're satisfied as to the appearance of the proposed development, its scale, design and character, and its relationship to its surroundings, which are diverse in nature. And then there would be a delegation to the Director of Police Services to make the grant subject to appropriate planning conditions. Councillor Kerr, I'm not sure if you were wanting the inclusion of a specific condition that may say something like further discussion to take place on materials and finishes.
Yeah. You content with that answer?
Sorry, Councillor Kerr, I'm not sure if you're still involved in the meeting at the moment. To see your screen on my screen's gone blank. Hello, Councillor Kerr. Jack, are you aware of the status of Councillor Kerr at the moment?
Thank you, Ian. From my point of view, Councillor Kerr is still in the call, but is off video and currently muted. And as members will recall from the virtual meetings protocol, which Council agreed, where a member has elected to turn off their video feed, they are considered to have left the meeting. So for clarifying this decision, it may be that reference to the seconder, Councillor Alexander, is required.
Thank you, Jack. Councillor McCluckie. Oh, so I think you're on mute at the moment, Councillor McCluckie.
Yes, I'm happy to leave it that some minor alterations in the discussions. It was a very good worded explanation. The principle of development is agreed by members. It's only subject to the materials not being agreed, and then hopefully, the man can go on building his property.
Thank you, Councillor McCluckie, and convener, with your leave, I think that would be the decision that would be noted for the minute.
Okay. Great. With that, agree. Great. Going back to the masonry. Six? No, it's not.
So, convener, if I might take this opportunity to just offer the committee my apologies, hopefully one final time for the day, and just to make members aware that any issues from the representatives of Blackness Community Council joining the meeting or addressing it do not lie with themselves, and it was my own fault, so please don't hold it against them. And I think with that, convener, it leads us to bring the deputation forward from the Community Council, and I think we've had indication that Karen Walker is going to start that off.
Hi, this is Karen Walker. Can you hear me okay, Jack?
Yes. Apologies for the
Thank you, Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Apologies for the hiccups. Blackness Community Council wish to support the Planning Department's recommendation for refusal of this application. Whilst we acknowledge that the applicant employed an architect of high calibre, the facts are that the objections submitted by BAC and other members of the public concur with many points and policies that the planners have noted in their committee report, including the siting and layout of the proposed house would not respect the settlement pattern of the surrounding rural area, and concur with the planners that the proposed development is contrary to policy PE 14, countryside, and also supports the BAC objection that this proposed large development would be an erosion of the rural area. BAC also stated the scale and position of this application, which includes 2 outbuildings, is highly inappropriate, and therefore agree with the planners that this would have an unacceptable landscape and visual impact contrary to policy PE 18 landscape. We also agree that the proposed development does not fit any of the relevant criteria where housing development is acceptable in the countryside, therefore is contrary to policy HC05. We noted in our objection that the location to the west of the site is in the middle of existing agricultural land on all 3 surrounding sides, which is also flagged in the planner's report, and therefore agree that this application does not accord with the cluster development criteria set out in SG01. The committee report also agrees with BAC where it objected that this proposal would damage the open field aspect in this area and would not comply with policy SG09 landscape character. We understand that the Roads Development Unit have no objection. However, we do still have some concerns regarding the impact on road safety on the B9109, which was previously cited as a ground for refusal by Falkirk Council for a previous house application in 2015, and particularly as traffic in general has become heavier in the intervening years. To sum up on the facts on which BAC and the Planning Department are all agreed, the application is contrary to policy HC05 and supplementary guidance SG1, as it does not comply with any of the criteria where housing development in the countryside is considered acceptable, is assessed as being contrary to the development plan, and there are no material planning considerations which would justify the proposed development. The planners also refer to other policies which BAC members are less familiar with. We fully respect and support the knowledge and the expertise that our planning department has, which we as volunteers do not. We have, for example, learned from the report that this application is not supported by the Scottish planning policy, since there are no benefits of this development which would outweigh the adverse landscape impact on our rural area and would change the local landscape area of Blackness, unique to the Falkirk region. A final concern for the Blackness area, and also included in our objection letter for this application, is drainage. And we note that the committee report states in item 4.2 of the report, the council's flooding team advised that a drainage impact assessment is required to show how the site would manage surface water, and goes on to say that more information is required to demonstrate that an adequate drainage solution can be achieved. I'd like to pass over, if I can now, to my colleague on back, another back member, Terry Rowland, to add further comments regarding drainage. And I'll take this opportunity to thank you, convener, and other councillors for your time today. Thank you, and over to Terry.
Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. As Karen said, we've been concerned with the localised flooding in our area for some time and have been approached by quite a few households with serious concerns about how flooding has become increasingly problematic in our area, affecting both homes and fields. My own home is included in that. Some time ago, we met with your flood prevention officer, who acknowledged that the flooding faced in our area is due to heavy clay soils, the breakdown of all the old clay pipe drainage system, the lack of drainage ditches, and this has been exacerbated by the increase in rainfall and the increase in general water usage. The problem no longer just affects lower lying properties, but a major flood recently threatened the integrity of a holding fairly close to this proposed site. I can cite several examples of this, and we have photographic and video evidence to back this up. Any new home being built will require to construct a soakaway, but all that means is that they will be able to dissipate the effluent from their property, but this in turn will affect lower areas of land and existing properties which exist there. We've repeatedly requested that the council meets with us and SEPA to examine this problem. An average household uses 150 litres of water per person per day. On top of the shedding of water from the large amount of buildings in this development, this would result in 12,000 gallons of water per month for a family of 4. With nowhere for the water to be absorbed, the water will continue to flow downwards, affecting both other fields and other properties. It has been shown that there's already surface water flooding north, south, east and west of this site, and a new house there would just exacerbate these problems for others. Thank you very much for giving us the time to address you.
Okay, thank you. I have a recollection, and maybe one of the officers can come in on this. In a debate with regards to Bowness and the Blackness flood zone, and been led by my former colleague, John Constable, in that matter. The other officers have that same memory, what was the outcome?
Vina, sorry, I don't have that recollection. I mean, you'll see from the report that does highlight in relation to this application the roads comments, flooding team comments in relation to drainage and the need for a drainage impact assessment to be undertaken.
I'm pretty sure that it was around the same time as the Bowness flood prevention schemes were implemented, but we can look into that.
McCluskey has a question for the deputation.
Councillor McCluskey, do you have a question for the deputation?
You're mute, John.
The deputation came up with some very important facts. I think there is nothing more significant at the moment that the flooding problems right throughout the Falkirk area, not just in Bowness, and we've got to take a higher level of significance relating to that. So I congratulate the deputation on their points. The one disagreement I would say was the fact that saying to members that I've been on the planning committee 15 years that we might not ken some of the policies. I can assure you in 15 years we've covered every policy right that's ever been. So as I say, is I take a wee bit thing about that, but I understand fully. And so could you answer me more about the flooding within that area? Are there any more details you could add to, because it is a significant point?
If I can come in on that one, then certainly my own home, when we above me, beautiful conversions, but subsequently I ended up with severe flooding affecting my home, we had to try and divert water onto our garden rather than into the bounds of our house. And I would say I got off comparatively lightly when you compare me with one of the properties in Mannerston, which has had severe problems. It is fairly close to the planned development site, and it certainly threatened the viability of that house. The farmer in the adjacent land helped by putting in a partial drainage system. They have also, luckily they own the field, so they could therefore put in a drainage ditch behind their home, which then diverts it, of course, elsewhere. And as you will also be aware, any water flowing from one property onto another property is just something that has to be accepted. It is not illegal to divert water onto lower lying properties. So I know that my neighbour next door to me has also had severe flooding. The farmer put in a drainage ditch which tried to alleviate that, but just in the recent rains, again, he had severe flooding right along the edge of his property, which affected quite a large area of his land. It is problematic, and of course this clay soil, in the old days where they used light machinery, they didn't compress these clay pipes, but of course the farmers agree heavy machinery now is just too heavy to cope with, for the clay pipes to cope with. They have crumbled, broken, and they just release water onto clay soil, which is non-absorbent.
Thanks, McCarthy.
Convener, I'm happy with the answers I got there. I'm ready to make a recommendation if if there nobody else with questions. I see Councillor Buchanan got a question though.
There's another deputation first. Who's that from?
That's from Miss Ailey Isaac,
Right.
architect.
Is an architect, Harry Isley. Harry, are you about?
Hi there, am I okay to start?
Yes.
Great. I'm just going to share my screen because I've got a presentation that I'd like to just talk through as well to help describe some of our points. Okay. So hello, my name is Ailey and I'm the architect based in Edinburgh and the principal director of the award-winning practice who's been commissioned to work on this project. I'm here to make a short presentation in support of this family home, as we believe the design is aligned with the overarching aims of the local development plan in relation to the Mannerston area. I'm here to explain how and why we have decided to position the house away from the road, and how the design incorporates all of the unique and special characteristics of the Mannerston settlement to achieve a high quality and timeless family home for the Thompson family. The applicants who I'm speaking on behalf of today are Catherine and James Thompson, a local couple who are in the process of moving back to Falkirk after more than 15 years in Hong Kong. They currently have an opportunity to buy a plot of land in the heart of Mannerston settlement and build a new and sustainable family home for themselves and their two young children, William and Isla. The site is the perfect location for their family. It is close to Catherine's parents at East Bonnard, who are reaching their mid-70s and might need care in the future. It is close to the couple's close friends, Craig and Julie Calvin, who live at Mannerston House and who have two young children the same age as William and Isla. And it is close to the National Equestrian Centre, where Catherine and Isla expect to train at and compete regularly. The plot of land at Mannerston that they would like to build their new house on is nestled in the very heart of the settlement and sits within a cluster of existing residential buildings, creating a unique development opportunity in the area. Catherine and James are keen for their new house to both respond to their own needs, but also successfully respond to the aims of the local development plan, as it was important that the design respect the local area. Our first task was therefore to review the local development plan, and we established that the site was not within Falkirk's Greenbelt area, and that the house by a road would most likely constitute infill development given the proximity of the neighbouring dwellings. There is also historic precedent for building on this site, as a large agricultural building was situated here for many years and can be clearly seen in aerial photographs from the 1950s. These points suggest that a house by the road would make sense in terms of a historic context and likely be granted through delegated decision as infill development, but the supplementary guidance includes a more specific aim for the Manaston area, which was to, quote, ensure that all new buildings and conversions in the Manaston Holdings area are carefully sited and designed to avoid a cumulative visual effect from the surrounding area. And this became our main goal with the design. In order to help us reach a decision on where best to position the house, we first looked at the landscape character assessment for the Bowness Coastal Hills area. The assessment notes that the area is made up of, quote, small rectilinear fields with numerous regularly spaced single-storey small holdings along the roads with large farm estates in between, and goes on to recommend that new dwellings are of appropriate design, scale, and material. We notice that this description refers to quite a big area spanning from Manaston in the east to Grangemouth Golf Club in the west, so we decided to carry out a more detailed study looking only at Manaston and established that there is another pattern of settlement, which is that houses are not just located along the road's edge, but that some are near the centre of the field pattern and accessed by long linear tracts such as number 13 and number 15 Manaston, which are just to the north of our site. We have identified these houses and others using white circles on the maps on the screen for easy reference. Our second step was to understand how the pattern of settlement is experienced in real life. This was particularly important to us as the eye-level view is often different to what you might expect looking at an area from above, as the hills, hedges, and trees and roads change how we see houses in the landscape. What we discovered is that the majority of houses, including those along the roadside, are experienced as if they are all in the centre of the field, surrounded by greenery. The houses are often paired or come with separate outbuildings, and this makes them appear as clusters in the landscape with their white walls and red pantile roofs standing out against the green backdrop. Our final step to understand the characteristics of Manaston was to study and establish which design features and construction materials are unique to the area. The photograph on the screen shows a selection of buildings that we looked at. We identified that the local vernacular have pitched roofs with clay pantiles, exposed stepped gables, whitewashed walls, and dark red timber shutters. The majority of the buildings are either single-storey or 1.5 stories in height, and the roof is often stepped or hipped at the ends. And they have openings varying between small windows for light and ventilation and to much larger barn doors for agricultural access. These characteristics, together with the way the houses are seen as clusters within a green landscape, were the most important defining features of how the settlement of Manaston is experienced in real life, and these were the qualities that we decided to take forward into the design of the house. The design put forward for planning sees a new family home, which is principally a single-storey pitched roof design with a separate garage and stable block set back from the roadside to maintain the green, open character of the countryside setting and minimise its cumulative visual effect in accordance with the aims of the local development plan. The design utilises the natural fall in the land, allowing the pitch of the roof to sit just below eye level from the road, and the buildings are carefully orientated so that the shortest gables face towards the road. The position of the house in the southwest corner of the site also means that it can benefit from the 5 mature trees which sit here, which will provide protection from the prevailing winds and offer shade in summer, which are important sustainable considerations in any new build house. The house will be accessed by a long linear track, which has been updated through discussion with Falkirk's Road Department during the planning process to achieve the required level of visibility at the road junction and to provide sufficient space for a car and horse box to safely use the access whilst maintaining the best possible road safety. The proposed elevations of the house show how we have incorporated the characteristics of the settlement into the design. The overall shape of the house is broken up to make it look like it was developed naturally over time. It has pitched roofs that are stepped and finished with historic clay pantiles. The brick walls will be finished in a light-coloured lime render, and there are dark red timber shutters, which are a unique trait to the Manaston area. Inside, the design will create a contemporary family home that will be able to adapt to the Thompson family's needs throughout their lives and as their children grow up. It will incorporate the latest renewable technology, such as ground source heat pump, to ensure it achieves passive house standards. We're also very happy to look at grey grey water recycling to minimise the impact on the area, as the Blackness Community Council have noted regarding drainage. The land around the house will be brought back to the life through re-establishment of hawthorn hedges, which is another key aim of the supplementary guidance, an introduction of a new kitchen garden, as well as small orchard to improve ecology and provide new habitats for wildlife, which are greatly needed in the area. This application presents a rare opportunity to approve a design for a bespoke house of the highest architectural quality on a neglected piece of land that will certainly be developed in future due to its position in the heart of the Manaston settlement. Our architectural proposal looks to preserve and highlight the story of Manaston, taking on board the design lessons and characteristics of the vernacular architecture and sensitively incorporating these ideas into a comfortable and sustainable family home. Thank you for listening, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have. And we also welcome the opportunity to arrange a site visit if it's possible within the time frame. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Questions? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, convener. I just wanted to ask the developer, if through yourself, convener, there has been talk about drainage issues. Have you identified any problems in relation to potential flooding, and how would you mitigate that problem?
Be for the planners to identify the problem first of all.
Right. Well, I was just asking I wanted to ask the developer if there was any issues relating to drainage that they had found.
And is there?
Is that to myself? Sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. If I might, actually, I might just share my screen again onto another document. So this, the issue around drainage was flagged to us at the very beginning of our appointment, and again through the planning process. So we provided more clarification on this matter within the planning process, and I think that document, that letter, will be available online. But just for clarity just now, an easy reference, the map that you can see on the screen is the SEPA flood map, which is often referred to for initial development and just to understand where the flooding risks happen in an area. As you can see, the site, there's a small area to the northeast of the site where there is a 0.1% chance of flooding, with the area immediately to the west of the site, which you can see in the darker purple, which is identified as higher risk of flooding every year. And that was the area that I also met with Blackness Community Council last August, I think, and they had also identified that that was the area that flooded most. They didn't flag anything within the site itself, but the flood map shows that there is some level of risk. The one thing about those flood maps is that they're quite high level, they use high level topography. So what we had done at the very beginning of the process was to commission a topographic survey which identified the exact levels of the site down to the centimetres. That 3D modelling information was taken forward into the design, and we haven't positioned the house in that risk area. We've positioned it to the southwest of the site. The floor level is ½ metre above this risk level, so the risk of flooding to the new house is minimal. In terms of Blackness's community point of the additional loading through a new build house contributing to the water in the area, I think we're happy to do the flood risk assessment. If that flood risk assessment identifies that the house would contribute negatively to the area, then I think we would look at grey water recycling, which would minimise, if not use all the water within the house. So I think that's to be seen. I hope that helps.
We over to the members.
Thanks, convener. I would like to ask the applicant, obviously we're saying that the officers are stating this is not sympathetic to the local area there, and the size and scale of it does seem, I mean, it's a beautiful drawings. I mean, I'm not saying that, they're fantastic, but why is it for a small family the need for this scale of development there? I mean, can you tell us how many horses are, you know, they got a fleet of taxis or something? I mean, it just seems to be very extensive, the what's planned for the future. And I was just wondering if you could add some information to why it appears such a major, although beautiful, development.
Yeah, absolutely. So the applicants have 2 horses. They don't expect to get any more. So the design of the stables has been designed in accordance with the equestrian guidelines for the size that is needed for 2 horses. So there's stables, there's a central area to park a horse box, and then there's a tack room and a storage area, which needs to be fire protected for the safety of hay and keeping of hay. There's another separate outbuilding, which is a garage. The garage is designed for 2 cars, and there's another small area to the side of that for a garden. They're taking on a 3-acre site, so they really need space to have gardening equipment. So that's what that separate area is for. And then the house, they wanted to apply. I spoke to them about this during the design process, and they wanted to apply. They'd recognised that some other applications in the area had been through many iterations and revised applications to include more and more needs on the site, but they said that they just wanted to be very open. They wanted to include everything that they would need from now into the future. They don't want to apply for any future applications, and they would just like the planning committee the opportunity to see the full scale of the development that they want to take on.
Thanks for that, and thank you, convener.
Yeah, we can open the members, and in particular if there's any queries regarding the proposal before us today. Isabel?
Thank you, convener, and apologise for coming a little bit early in this item. I don't think I've actually particularly changed my mind. I've got to congratulate Ailey. I thought that was one of the most professional presentations we've had. It was an exceptionally good presentation. Unfortunately, not probably enough to change my mind on where I want to go with it. I've got one question for Julie about the appropriate. One of the parts in the reasons is the appropriate, and it's not an appropriate infill development. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because it's the only thing that I am being reasonably consistent here, because I've not been keen on this, because I think we had a number of these before, and I might have been on my own against the whole committee on them, but that's fine. Can you explain?
Of course, the housing in the countryside policy, which is as detailed in the report, has several criteria where development in the countryside may be assessed as being acceptable. One of those criterion is for infill development, and there's 2 situations which are outlined in SG01. The first one is infill development, and that's where you've generally got a row of houses and you've got a gap site. There's obviously requirements as to distances between properties and so forth. The other one, which is a new addition to our new SG01, and that's building clusters, so cluster development, and there's quite strict criteria that you need to assess a development against to be considered cluster development. That includes being enclosed on 3 sides, and those are set out on page 11 of SG01 if members are interested in that. This proposal does not meet either of those criteria, either being an infill plot or being cluster development. You'll have seen from the images that Bernard showed, and also the applicant's architect, that the building, the house itself would be to the west of the site and open countryside, and that's where we've taken that view.
Thank you for that, Julie. That sort of confirms, because it was the only question I had, because we've seen infill sites coming in before, and I got the way this was sitting quite away from the road and made it quite different. In that case, convener, I would like to propose the officer's recommendations.
Members? Councillor Murtough?
Yeah, I have to say, unfortunately, I'm going to second my ward colleague, and it is unfortunate because I feel that both, and if there was a way of, if it had been an infill development or if it had met the criteria for being enclosed, it really would be a stunning development and enhancement. And I think the research and the matching of the materials, the matching of the character has been absolutely excellent and first class. And it, you know, the sustainability angle, all of these things, I think, in a slightly different context, would have made it a great enhancement and an excellent addition. But consistent with other planning applications, I think the policy in terms of housing in the countryside, given that it does not meet those, and given that, although I understand it would be a fantastic enhancement for the family who would occupy the property and any subsequent, there doesn't seem to be any material consideration in which we can judge against that would overturn that from a planning policy point of view. And so to be consistent with all the other applications in which I've stated similar views, I don't see any other option but to support the officer recommendation on that basis, which I do feel is in some ways unfortunate, but you know, our green spaces are extraordinarily precious, and you know, the principle of that and sticking to our local development plan is really important. But again, I'd like to commend the architect for the approach they've taken as well in bringing this forward, and to hear that they've had engagement with the community council is also a very welcome thing to hear, even in advance of the planning committee. But unfortunately, I don't think that it meets the policy objective, and on this occasion I'm going to have to second Councillor Bowes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Murtough. Anyone? Provost?
Agreed. Happy to support the motion.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Motion, right, yeah. Yeah, well, thank you very much for your attendance, ladies and gentlemen. Something then just be quicker than I thought it was. Sorry.
Convener, could I just say, Speaker, I believe on behalf of the whole committee, we're delighted to see you back in the chair today, and I hope there's continuous improvement, but delighted you're back there. Thank you, sir.
Much appreciated, Provost, and thank you for your contribution to the planning process. Well, I was off. Hopefully things will continue to improve, but wait and see.
Convener, as this is our last full planning meeting, can I thank you for your leadership in the last 5 years of the planning committee? It has helped it move. I think it's been a very understanding committee and members have all worked to get very well together under your leadership, and I also extend that to the provost when he stepped in for you. He kept up that same attitude to the committee. It's been an honour to serve in this committee.
Thank you.
Make me bust now. If it's possible. Well, thanks so much, folks.
Thanks to the chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chair.
Thanks.